Hi and welcome back to Newton Grove and my very crowded and mostly messy garage. Now today I'm going to be weathering my Black 5 over here. This is one of the San Chen Black 5s dating from around about 2005 or thereabouts. They were one of the first ready to run O-gauge Black 5s that you could buy in O-gauge. And many years ago, as you can see over here, I have already pre-weathered this, but I always wanted to get around to finishing it off and adding more detail. For whatever reason, I just never did. Now, to achieve this look so far, what I did is Tim Shackleton many years ago in one of the Right Track series of DVDs gave some great advice, which was he made up a mix of acrylic matte black and matte leather, roughly around a sort of 50-50 mix or 60-40, just, until you got the color that you wanted correct. And what I wanted to achieve with the Black 5 over here was to give it that kind of mucky, dirty look that you got in the mid to late 60s. And I really feel like I've replicated that very, very well. It's just, like I say, it's missing a lot of detail now, especially when it comes to weathering. I've had a lot of locomotives weathered by Neil from Ellis Clark Trains, who's amazing. I've obviously done my own weathering as well. And if you've also watched the 1960s weathering series on Key Model World with Humbrol magazine that I did with Mike Wild, then you'll see how other techniques have happened as well. So it's now finally time for me to tackle more of my Black 5. Now, as you'll hear me say in the weathering series on Key Model World, but I'll say it again now, I always like to look at reference photographs before I start tackling a project. And this book over here is called The Heyday of Leeds, Holbeck and its Locomotives. And inside here there are some incredible photographs of Black 5s and other engines as well. So if we see over here, you've got two Black 5s around the shed inside Holbeck Roundhouse, and straight away you can see over here the front of the cylinders, rusty, dusty, dirty, and so forth. And it's nice to always use reference photographs before you tackle something because you want to base this in truth. Now, the look I'm really going for here, I don't want to have something that's filthy. I want to sort of keep it looking roughly how it is. I just want to bring some highlights on. So for example, brake blocks, a little bit of brake dust. I obviously want to be able to put the highlights onto the cylinders at the front on both sides to really kind of get more of that dirty, kind of rusty look as such. Maybe a few other embellishments along the boiler as well. The other thing I want to do is I want to do a bit of weathering down over here underneath the fall plate. I've got some wonderful paint pens over here, which I want to bring out the detail in the handrails because they usually got worn. And I also want to tackle the tender both inside and on the frames as well. But we'll come to the tender after we've done the locomotive. Now, all the products I'm using here are literally from the Humbrol range. I'll just put this to the side. So what I have over here are the Humbrol weathering powders. I've been using these for years and years and years. This one over here is Humbrol Smoke, and this one over here is Humbrol Dark Earth. And I like to use those a lot for the basis of most of my weathering. But for the highlights, I've also got a few more. So I've got Humbrol Rust, which is very strong. I've got Humbrol Iron Oxide, which is also quite strong. And to tone things down, I just have Humbrol Black. And I like to put that on toward the end. Now, before you tackle any form of weathering, it's important, especially with powders, it's important to spray your models with some matte varnish. Now, this particular stuff here from the paint factory, I was recommended by Neil from Ellis Clark Trains. He uses this on all the weathering that he does. And he basically said, just give the locomotive a gentle waft all over, just so that the powders have got something to adhere to. Now, if you're spraying a model with paints, you don't need to do this just yet. But when you're using powders, you need to have a different surface other than the smooth finish of a clean locomotive to start tackling weathering. So, what I'm going to start with are these. These are from the AK range. This one over here is chrome. I've also got another one over here, which is copper, which I'll be using for things like the drain cocks. So I'll give this a bit of a shake up, and the first thing I want to do is just very, very subtly is go along over here and just bring out some highlights in the handrail. Now, as you can see, this is actually very, very bright. It's basically silver. That will get toned down later on with powders. So for now, I'm just going to put that all over where I want it to go, just to get that look. Being very careful not to also paint the inside of the doors. And then I'll do the same thing on this side too. Now the thing is, locomotive handrails, even if they were painted fully black or green, whatever the case may have been, after many weeks, months and years of loco crews climbing up, climbing down, climbing up, climbing down, wiping them clean of soot and oil and everything else, the paint did start to fade and it slowly went back to metal, which is why I'm replicating this over here. Now I can also do this on the front over here. We've got our handrails on the top. So if you can see that, I'll just do the top over here. Not too much because these also will get rather filthy. I'm just wanting to bring in, as I said, just a few small details. Like any form of weathering, it's all about being subtle. Whilst I've got the pens out, I'm going to use the copper pen and I'm going to do the drain cocks down here because, well, they're copper. The good thing I like about this copper as well is it's rather dark, which is lovely. You can probably just see the highlights over here. Once again, I'm not trying to make this overly bright. It will get toned down a little bit later on, and even if it doesn't get toned down fully, you can just see there it hasn't taken to the entire brass rotting, and that's fine because it's subtle. I'll do the other side as well. I must admit, these paint pens, I think, are amazing. I wish I had found them years and years and years ago. But now that I've got them, I use them for everything. In fact, when I got them, I was actually highlighting a lot of detail pipe work on my 4MT tank, which you'll see in another video on this channel. Right, now the other thing I could do whilst I got this out is I could do the whistle and I could do the safety valves, and I think I actually might do that right now. So, just a little bit on the Stanier hooter, not too much. As I said, what I want to make sure of is that you can see everything, but it's not shining in your face brand new. If you overdo something, you can always tone it down a bit later on with your powders and so forth, but try to make sure you're not doing everything over the top to begin with. In fact, over here, what I'm doing with these safety valves is just getting a small highlight of the colour, which is good. Same thing down here, you've got the pipes from your lubricators. I'll do them as well, just very subtly. And that's good. So that concludes using these paint pens. Now the fun starts. So to start with now, I'm going to use my powders. Now what I think I might do to begin with is I'll tackle the cylinders first. And I'm going to use some of this rust colour because it is very, very bright. And then I can tone it down later with the dark earth and maybe even the smoke, because I want to get that look and feeling of a bit of rust and a bit of brake block dust and track dirt, but I don't want it to be stupidly in your face. Now, these pigments are very, very powerful. So, you know, use them sparingly. And never use your favorite brush when you're doing this either. Always use something that you don't mind knackering, basically. Right, I always load up the brush, give it a bit of a tap out, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start to go in here and I like to just sort of dab it on or stab it on. If you've watched our weathering series, again, 1960s weathering on keymodelworld.com, this is the same technique I used on the 21-ton mineral wagons. Basically just stippling it on here and there because rust and dust and so forth never forms in a very uniform way. It is very randomized, and doing it that particular way I found works a lot. In fact, I've been very blessed because there's been people who watch that series who have come up to me at Model World Live or other exhibitions and they show me their version and it looks amazing. So this technique really does work very, very well. But like I said, subtle is the key. So just going in there, stabbing it on at the top, bit by bit by bit. So you can just start to see there that it's starting to form very nicely. I'm trying my best to just randomize it, not overdo it, but you definitely do get that highlight, which is lovely. Now, it was always the front of the cylinders, when you look at the photographs, that seem to have got a lot of this, dust color and rust most. But as you've seen from some of the photographs, the rest of the cylinders can get a little bit of it too. I don't want to go overboard, so I'm just going to get a little bit and just tap it on. Just a little bit. So whatever's on the brush, I'll just bring it down like so. I'm only wanting to make a highlight. I don't want this locomotive to be running around with bright orange cylinders, because some cylinders stayed very black, some of them were covered in oil. It was always randomized. I personally just think that if you see a locomotive with bright orange cylinders, even though yes, it is prototypical to some degree, it just looks a bit too much in model form. So, as I say, just lightly just going over here. And with the cylinders, because of course they are flush, the weathering would have eventually streaked down. So whilst I'm stabbing it, I'm also dragging my brush down at the same time, just to get that look where it's there and the weather has brought everything down. So as you can see there, that's nice and subtle. The other area I'm going to do is just underneath, over here, underneath the fall plate, because this area was filthy, rusty, dusty, full of coal, full of oil and rust. I'm going to start with the rust. Once again, just chucking it down here, stippling it on, randomizing the whole pattern. You've also got this little crease over here, just under the cab on both sides, so I'll do that. Right, that is looking fairly good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the lid back on my rust. If you spill these, they go everywhere. They go all over your floor, your baseboard, your clothes. They're a nightmare to clean up, and these cost a bit, so you don't want to spill and waste them. Ask me how I know. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a little bit of our dark earth now, just a little bit. This stuff is super strong. And I'm just going to, once again, just stipple this ever so slightly, just around the cylinder. Not a lot, just a little bit, because I want to just be able to give a bit of tonality to what I'm doing here without making it too brown. It is there. It's probably so subtle you really can't see it, but that's what weathering is all about, being subtle. Okay, right, so I think you'll agree that just there, that Black 5 is already looking 10 times better than it was when we first started this. And I'm very happy with that. Like I say, little bit by little bit. Now, what I think I might do is I'm going to start with our smoke. Now, I've got once again, a very knackered brush over here, but this one is very soft, whereas the one I was using before is very brittle. What I want to do is I'm going to start toning down the smoke box, make it a little bit more, I want it to stand out from the boiler barrel. So, let's just, once again, dab it on, just bit by bit over here. Now you can do this as strong or as subtly as you want. I'm trying to be subtle about it. And once again, by stippling this on and randomizing it, you're going to get some heavy patches, some light patches. And the good thing about that is you pick up on highlights, it just makes it look a lot more real. A lot more real. This is actually looking really, really good. The advantage, as I said at the very beginning, of spraying the entire model with the matte varnish is at least the powders can stick to something. The other thing is, when you respray, you lose a lot of the detail in these powders. So I could be a bit heavy-handed if I want to with this, but right now I'm going for subtleties. If I need to respray and reapply later on, I don't mind that. I'd rather build it up bit by bit rather than do far too much and not be able to take it off later. Whatever works for you. This is just what works for me. So, everything down here, of course, got very filthy because of all the ash that was always shoveled out. I can do inside my chimney. Why not? Now, if anything gets onto your running board, in fact, I'm actually just going to put a bit on the running board because, once again, these were filthy. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. Dab it on wherever you want to, blend everything in. Straight away, this smoke powder is making such a great difference to the smoke box of this Black 5. You know, I always used to be very scared of weathering. When I first got into model railways, I used to buy pristine 00 gauge models, and I used to see pictures and videos of weathered things, and I used to think, wow, I mean, how could you do that? And then when you start getting interested in weathering, you think, well, I can't do that. But when you just lean into it and have a go, and you practice with something cheap and nasty like a wagon or a very cheap broken locomotive, and you just start to play around with what you can do with these powders and paints and so forth, you really start to get addicted to weathering. And when you start to really pay attention to photographs of the world around you and how these locomotives looked, you start to get excited by what you can achieve. And this is how I'm feeling right now, very excited by what I'm achieving over here. So I'm dabbing some on the running boards. It just really brings out highlights. Put a little bit more underneath my smoke box, down here as well. I've got some white powder which I might throw on a little bit later on, just once again a little bit of extra highlight. Yeah, this is looking amazing. Well, as you can see from those close-ups, there's a huge change which has just gone on to this Black 5. You can really see the subtleties, you can see the highlights in the powders, and that's just with one color, or one shade. So, needless to say, I'm very, very happy with this. I now need to sort of work out what I want to do with the rest of this engine. I mean, what I could do, for example, is just go in there with a little bit more of the smoke and just give it a few highlights here and there, which I might do. But I think for now what I'll do is I'll start work on the back over here. And what I actually might do is just use the smoke again, just to tone down some of the frame, the very back over here. Combine it with the rust. Now the sharp eye of you would have noticed this wooden Lazy Susan that I've got. Now I got this at B&M. It's of course for the kitchen, and I do have the proper plastic modelling one, but I saw this one and I thought that's the right size to weather a no-gauge locomotive, and so I bought it. £5, you can't go wrong. And here's the thing, this will never see the kitchen, it will never have food on it, so therefore I can be as careless and filthy as I want, and if it gets ruined, it gets ruined. It's £5. So I'm just giving a little bit of this smoke powder now on our handrail, just to sort of tone down the chrome, and a little bit over here on the fall plate as well, just to once again stipple this on in the cab, just to really bring out the subtleties in that. Yeah, that is lovely. What I might just also do is just do a little bit on top of the boiler, on top of the firebox, I should say, over here. Just dab it on, once again stippling it. I do like to stipple with powders. I never like to, brush them in vertical or horizontal streaks. I think that just gives you a very unrealistic look. So a little bit over here on top of the barrel, on top of the dome, the injector feed. Not too much, just bit by bit by bit. Maybe a bit more down here on the running board as well. The good thing about using this Lazy Susan, of course, is you don't want to be touching the model with your hands while you've got powder all over the place, because you don't want to be taking off everything you've just put on and putting all over your fingers. That's looking very good. What I might do now, I'm not going to use my dark earth on this because it's already got that kind of mucky look that I want. But what I will do is bring out some of the Humbrol black, just to sort of tone a few things down here and there. Put a little bit more, I guess, darkness on top of the barrel, and just see how that goes. Once again, I'll be using my soft brush. I don't want to use a hard brush for this. It's good to have a combination between soft brushes and hard brushes because the soft brush definitely gives you a different result to a hard brush. Okay, once again, load the brush up, nice and subtle. The thing with the black is it's not always easy to see. But just dab it on, rub it in here and there. The good thing about doing this on the top of the boiler barrel is some of it is naturally going to fall down onto my running board as well, which is good because then I can also mix that together too. Do some over here on the top of our cab, because cabs were filthy. It's very therapeutic doing this. I may have mentioned that before, but I really, there's something about just taking your time and patience and doing something creative. And that's what modeling is really all about. It's about tuning out from the modern world, all your problems, all the things that happen during the week or during the day, coming downstairs wherever your models are kept, and literally just focusing on creating something, on doing something, being artistic. That's the good thing about model railways. It isn't just about playing trains, it's about, well, creativity. Right, I am very, very, very happy with how this is looking. Now, as you can see over here, a lot of it has also fallen down to the running board. I'm just going to literally dab that all in. Nothing gets wasted. You really start to get an amazing natural look. Yeah. This is looking amazing. I'm very happy with how this now looks, so I'm going to basically classify the Black 5 loco part of it as done. Now, as I said to you before, you can always do more at a later stage. So I might look at this in a month's time or a year's time and think, I wouldn't mind trying a little bit here, trying a little bit there. What I am not doing is I'm not going to put the white limescale lines down that you see on so many different models. So I don't want to have them on the washout plugs or the safety valves or behind the piston packing on the cylinders. Sometimes I think that gets overdone. And as you can see in some archival photographs, there are locomotives that ran around and you didn't have the limescale marks either at all or just when that particular photograph or film was taken. And I've seen some wonderful models that are weathered, but they've all got the white lines down the washout plugs and everything else. And I want to avoid that kind of cliche. So this Black 5 is not going to have any of that limescale. So what I'll do is I'll just give this a very, very light misting with the matte varnish just to really seal those in without toning them down too much, just a very gentle waft all around, and then we'll move on to the tender. Right, so I've put my Black 5 to the side for now, and we're going to tackle the tender. Now, as you can see, I've already given this, once again, like the rest of the locomotive, a really nice, good going over with the matte black and the matte leather acrylic paints from Humbrol. But again, we're going to be using these powders just to bring in some details and tone things down. So to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my dark earth on the tender frame. And I'm going to use my soft brush. Now, this pigment I find can be very, very strong, so use it sparingly. And I will literally just bring it in, little bit by little bit. I don't want this to look too chocolatey. I want it to just look, you know, road dirt and so forth, but definitely get that kind of brownness that we've seen in so many photographs. You can start to see it forming in there now, which is good. Just the highlights, once again, stipple that in. If you stipple it in rather than brushing it on, it'll stick a lot better. I'm actually quite happy with that. It's not too much. So I will do the face over here as well. Keeping this all subtle. Do a little bit underneath. And now do the other side as well. Last but not least, we'll do the back. but only on the frame. So underneath, just a little bit here. I know I keep saying subtle, but that really is the key to weathering. Subtle, subtle, subtle. That can be enough for the dark earth right now. And what I'm going to do is just like I did on the Black 5 cab, there's some handrails over here. I'm just going to go ahead with my chrome pen and I'm going to paint those in too. Right, now, just like the locomotive, I've painted the handrails on the front. I've also painted the handrails on both sides of the back. It really looks fantastic. I'm sure that other people have done this before, but I've never actually seen models, whether that be O gauge or double O gauge or whatever, where they've actually done the handrails. So now that I've done this, I actually might do it on most of my stock. Right, the next thing is, well, what I might do is, first and foremost, I'm going to tackle the outside, put a little bit of soot on there, just to tone it down again with a bit more black, like we did for the boiler of the locomotive. Once again, use my soft brush. And this time, I'm actually just going to drag it down. Because tenders are also obviously flush sides, start at the top and drag it down. Get that kind of horizontal look to everything. Yeah. Oh, that looks very nice. I'm liking this a lot. Once again, like the highlights that you get with the Humbrol smoke powder, I think they're just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I might just put a bit more over here. Really tone that down. Trying to randomize the whole thing as well, just to get patches rather than the entire side. Now, I'm going to do exactly the same thing on this side. The trick here is you want to make sure that each side looks unique to the next side. You don't want to have the same pattern on both sides because that's not realistic either. So I'm really trying to make sure that before I had a heavy patch around the totem, this time I'm making sure that that's not the case. I might actually put more of a heavy patch toward the back. Well, there you go, that's nice and subtle. Once again, we're going to do down here, under the fall plate, under the connection. This is where you really get to mix it in with the brown to really start to get that lovely mix of colors. I'm going to dab it onto the tender plate here and also in there, just to really make that look nice and messy. And then once again, my handrails, just tone those handrails right down. Now the other thing I might do is I might just do some on the very top of the tender here, as if smoke and ash has fallen. So I'll just do the top surfaces rather than the face, because I want it to look as if smoke and soot and ash have fallen on top of these surfaces here. Yeah, that's looking really, really good. Finally, on the back, same sort of thing. Now, I am missing the cap for the tender, but I've got a replacement from Alice Clark, so I will fit that at a later date. So for now, I'm just going to put a little bit of soot over here, because so much ash and soot accumulated on these tenders. Once again, you see a lot of modelers, they just do rust. But if you've ever been on top of the tender of a heritage locomotive, you will see there is just so much ash. It's crazy. That and some coal, which is also spilled over from when they were being loaded. But they're not as rusty as you would think. So once again, make that nice and ashy, especially in the corners where it's hard to reach. That is looking so, so good. Right, I'm going to tone that down with a little bit of black, and then we can work on the inside of our coal space. All right, I've now toned down the tender a little bit with some black, which is very nice. Once again, it's very subtle, so it's very hard to see on camera. Now I'm going to start with the interior of the coal space. Now, a lot of people paint this rust, and whilst there was rust in them, if you've ever been inside the cab of a working locomotive and you see where the coal is, whilst there's a little bit of rust in there, the amount of coal dust that is there, they always tend to wet the coal down before they put it into the tender or they put it into the bunker, and there's always a whole bunch of that coal dust which literally does stick to the side of the tender body. So it's very dark earthy, very black. You got patches of rust, but it's not rusty like you see so many other modelers do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my dark earth. I'm going to use that as my base. And go in here and turn the whole thing down. Give this a really good coat. Once again, sort of stippling this in. Trying to get it into every single part of the tender over here. Up the top, down the bottom, everywhere. This is where you can actually randomize things. You know, you can literally get it and paint it into everything. So right now I'm literally just brushing it underneath the fold at the top of the tender over here. I'm brushing it at the very back, so you can just see over here. I want to make sure that this color gets everywhere first, because this is my base color. And just go over the entire thing. So you can just, this is where you can afford to be a bit messy and so forth, because we're going to change this completely in a few moments. Right, when you look in here now, it's basically like a chocolate factory in there. It is completely and utterly changed. The good thing about it though is because it's combined with the pre-weathering I've already done, it does give a nice, good look to it. But now I'm going to start to tone this down with my soot and my black, because as I said to you before, these were never rusty, these were never just one color. So I'm going to go in here with my soot and tone the entire thing down. And this is where I'm going to start to stipple it in. I want to create these nice patches. I'm hoping that you can see everything I'm doing here. That's looking really, really good so far. So I've already toned it down a lot, and it's no longer chocolate. Now I'm going to bring in my rust. Once again, use this sparingly, be subtle with it, and put it where you know it's going to get a bit rusty. So for example, down the very bottom, it's going to get rusty, because that's where all the water accumulates. So if we look at the very face of the tender over here, put some rust in there, for example, and a little bit onto the floor. Definitely put some rust under here, because we need that. Stipple it all on. If you get it randomly everywhere, like I've got over here on the back, that doesn't matter so much. Get it right in there, stipple it on, and then once again, just do your highlights, do your corners with the rust, just a little bit. If these engines were being used every single day and there was coal being loaded in them every single day, then the rust that you would see would literally be very minimal, because you can't see all the way into these things anyway. And the irony is that once I've finished all this, I'm going to get myself some coal from Geoscenics, their O-gauge coal, and I'm going to put the coal in there, so half of what I'm doing you're not even going to see anyway. Now I'm going to tone the entire thing down with black, because coal and coal dust is black. I'm going to get a good dollop of it and just throw it straight in there, maybe even two. Now, this is where I'm just going to mix it all together, because like I said, actually maybe even the third one, everything here, it's subtleties. Mix it all around inside your tender, because that way you're combining shades, you're combining tones. Because coal tends to sort of fall everywhere and everything, you can afford to have different sort of streak marks and patches as well. So stipple some on, dab some on. Make sure you do over here on the tender face as well. That really helps to bring in the subtleties. And then when you're finished in general, when you think you've got a good thing going, put your lid on the powders. Now the messy part, blowing the whole thing out. The one thing I am going to do now is I've got all this extra black over here on the Lazy Susan. I'm just going to put some more of this in because it could have been a bit better. There's a few streak marks in here which I'm not completely happy with. They're going to get covered with coal anyway, but I'd rather tone them down now. And we do have a sort of rusty chocolate, smoky black look inside our tender now, which I really like a lot. The one last thing I'm going to do, I've got a little bit of rust over here on the Lazy Susan. I'm just going to pick that up and just put it over here on our steps. Not too much, you want to keep all this nice and subtle again. Put some on the back of the tender as well, on those steps, not too much. Right, as you can see, this is a very, very messy job. I probably should have actually worn some gloves, but that's okay. That's not a bother at all. The final thing I'm going to do is give this a gentle mist. Just to seal those powders in. And basically, for now, we're done. So the last thing for me to do is to add the coal in and of course put the actual cap on on the water filler because it's missing. And apart from that, I'm going to call this, at this stage, done. I might go back in there a little bit later on and pick out some of the break blocks and so forth with some paint, but as far as my powder weathering goes, this is now done. So I'm going to wash up, and while I do that, I'll show you some photographs and some video of the final results of the weathering of this Black 5. Well, it's a very messy job, but as I said throughout this video, it's a very rewarding job, and I'm very happy with how this Black 5 has been transformed now, just using those 5 simple Humbrol weathering powders. In fact, 4, because I actually never use the iron oxide, but I always have it there just in case I want to use it. That, and of course the chrome pen and the copper pen from the AK range, and then just matte varnish. You can see what you can do with just these simple tools and a very easy strategy of dabbling on, stippling it on, and so forth. So I'm very, very happy with that. Hopefully you've taken something out of this. And like I said, if you watch the 1960s weathering video series on keymodelworld.com, which Mike Wild and myself produced through Hornby magazine, you can see a lot more techniques as far as weathering powders, using enamels, using an airbrush and so forth. It isn't just the way we do it over here on my own personal project. Right, thank you so much for watching this video. I really do hope that you got something out of it. Consider becoming a Patreon to the channel if you want. The link is below. I'd really love to have you there, and I'll make sure you get some nice good Easter eggs that don't go out to the public, or if they do, you're going to get them very first of all. If there's any questions you've got as far as weathering or O-gauge or anything else like that, please feel free to just drop me your comments below, or you can send me an email as well. You can find that email address on my YouTube channel. Right, well, I'm off for a brew, so I will see you next time on Newton Grove.